Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about knives from the 1950s, basically that whole decade. And we're looking at how knives had changed from the collapse of the cutlery industry, how it rebounded, some of the pressures, some of the technology advancements that were being made, kind of the demographics, everything that has to do with the knife industry in the 1910s. So, or I'm sorry, 1950. So, if you look at, say, 2010 to now, in just 14 years, there has been a tremendous evolution in knives. Not only a change in knives, but also expectations. So we have changed. The end user of knives expect a lot more out of knives nowadays. And so 10 years, a decade can make a tremendous difference. And that's why we're just going to take a small portion of time, the 1950s, and look at what was going on in the knife industry at that time. If that would interest you, if you'd like to hear more about that, I'd love to see you in the video, and I'll check it out. Hey, welcome back to the Fortified Castle. Hi to all my viewers, and today we got a really cool discussion on knives in the 1950s. It was a pivotal year for knives and knife companies, and a lot was going on. A lot of evolution in the marketplace as well as in technologies. And so we're going to look a little bit at some of that in the upcoming video. And I think you're going to find that pretty interesting and fascinating. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so 1950, I guess you would classify the knife industry overall in the 1950s as in a consolidation phase still, and a rebuilding phase. So in the 1930s, the cutlery industry collapsed in the United States. The trend was basically do anything you could to survive. And we went from 3 to maybe 600 knife companies down to about 20 of them, with only 10, 13 major companies surviving that collapse. Along came World War II. That was a breath of life for the knife companies. So the government contracts that they were tasked to fill helped tremendously in rebuilding these companies. And after the war, they set to do that. Not an easy task. So bear in mind, these companies had to reconstruct their companies from the wartime production of knives. In some cases, knives like the military knives were this, like these, they were kind of the same patterns that they'd always produced, and but in other cases they were really different knives and knives patterns. So it was hard for a lot of the knife companies to switch from wartime production into civilian production. In some cases, they simply marketed the knives that they made in World War II to the publics. And so you could see that with Case, Cattaraugus, Powell, Schrade, Walden, Cattaraugus. These companies, a lot of them marketed their military knives to the public for a time. So it was also a time of demographics changing. And so one of the things that led to the collapse in the cutlery industry in the United States was demographics changing. So you had mostly rural nation, country nation, moving into the cities, urbanization. And as people moved into the cities, there was less of a need for these knives. And so that really hurt the knife industry and was a primary factor in the collapse. But that kind of had stabilized by the 1950s, although urbanization was still going on. It was a major thing that was going on in the knife industry at that time. So let's just look at what happened in the 50s. So one thing, the type of knives were changing. So that was across the board. To begin with, if you knives like these fruit knives that we kind of like to collect and look at, they're really amazing. They just totally went away by the 1920s, or let's say the 1930s, because stainless steel came about. So you didn't need fruit knives. You had stainless steel that was resistant to the acids of fruits and things like that those small knives were used for. Another change was these pen knives and pocket knives, these fob knives like this, were going away. So they didn't completely go away in the 50s, but the demand for them dropped markedly in the marketplace. And also just general pen knives. And so what you see is a consolidation from companies offering many types of pen knives to that demand going down to just a couple models of pen knives in the 1950s. And that was by the middle of the 1960s, pen knives, most companies didn't even produce them, and the ones that did only offered one or two. You also see quality, even though knife manufacturers are actually trying to build their quality up. Here you have a fantastic Boy Scout knife. This thing, look, it's even milled on the back, and typical of the era, that this knife was produced in. But in the 50s, you start seeing a lot less quality put into these knives. They're not as wide, they're not as heavy, they're not as built as well, and they're hefted in plastic. And so knife companies have wholesale. Most companies just don't offer bone at all in the 1950s. Some do, like Case continued to use it. Trade Walden continued to use it on a limited basis. Cattaraugus still used it. But most knife companies just quit using bone altogether after World War II. Color. So all this beautiful colored celluloid that you had in the early part of the 20th century was pretty much gone. And there was still some color being produced. There were still some candy stripe knives being produced. But for the most part, all this color just flew out the door. And what you were left with was kind of a muted type of color. And so you could still get some color in knives, but it wasn't the same. It was more like this. And so this was a imitation pearl. And that's kind of what you got in a yellow or a white and sometimes a gray color. And so just vastly reduced. And the colors that you did get were bakelite. And of course, bakelite doesn't accept colors too well. Here's a well-made Camillus military knife from the World War II. Beautiful bone. It's well constructed. It's not, I wouldn't say, a finely constructed knife. So these were military knives, but after the war, this was a military knife right here. They were made in stainless steel, and that's what replaced it. So you can see the character is just changing in the knife industry altogether. And then you had companies like Shipley, a very old and large hardware knife supplier in the United States, went out of business in the 60s. Hibbert, Spencer, and Bartlett, another huge um, hardware concern, went out of business in 1960. And Powell went out of business in 1953. And this is a Powell knife right here. Pretty nice cattle knife. It's huge. Huge. Really huge. Um, so you had companies still going out of business and consolidation in the industry going on. So, straight razors, you had Gillette, this Gillette safety razor, um, and they were replacing these straight razors here. You could still get straight razors for a long time, but gone was these elaborate um, markings and etchings on them, and the elaborate scales on these knives, largely replaced by plastic and knives that just were stainless steel across there, no etching whatsoever, and that's a true across the board. So used to be a lot of etching going on knives, and by 1950, very few knives were still etched on the blades. It was a way to save money. Another thing that you find is the companies are still trying to be competitive and produce a good knife at an affordable price. And so, things like etching is a way to save money, and they do away with that. The robustness of the knives themselves is reduced so that your blade stock is smaller than generally that you found in the early 20th century, 1900s to 1940. And so they're doing these things to save money. Bone was getting expensive for a variety of reasons, so they used things like rough black. This is rough black by Case right here, and also what they called smooth black. And it's a rubber based kind of composite scale material, and just black overall. So you see a lot of black knives in that era in the 1950s, and also brown. But the brown that was used oftentimes was wood, and this was done so well, by the way, that it led Case to come up with the two different oval shields. One was Case, and one had the circle around it. So the one with the circle around it identified real bone from imitation bone, and they made these in plastics and also wood. And so there was some brown, but it was a lot of black. Here is a plastic handled cut master from that era, and you know it's uh, just a show of what the Uticas used to be like. The Uticas used to be so robust. They weren't finely made, but they were just robust. Here's another one right here, black scales in it, and a lot of these rounded, narrow type boasters in the 1950s. You see, they also were importing knives. So this is a Robertson, but it's imported from Germany. So it's a German-made Robertson knife, and you see that in the back right there. And so this is another thing that companies were doing. I don't know whether it really worked for them or not, but they were importing knives from Germany to try to get less expensive knives produced. Here again are some Robertson's, pretty nice knives made in the 50s, but not quite the standard. This is when you get into a time where Robertson used to polish their the top square of their tangs, and they had quit doing that. And it's when the back of the back springs, they're getting away from polishing those, and any way they can save money. Still a really good knife, but here's a French ivory, which is a composite. ivory. They're not using real ivory anymore. They're not using celluloid. This is a different kind of composite material, but not the crazy colors. And here's another Robeson from that era. And again, you can see it's just, plastic there that they're using. There was a bunch of different plastics that they used in that time frame before Delrin came out in the 60s. The real story was Imperial. So Imperial Knife Company was the largest knife company in America at this time and the largest knife company in the world. And they did it by selling inexpensive, cheap knives like this. They had the shellback technology. So this whole outer scale is hefted in one piece of metal and then tagged onto it. It was really quick, easy way to do it. And it's what people were buying, so that put pressure on the quality knife manufacturers too, and that's another demographic change. I mean, people quit caring about a lot of quality in their knives. They just wanted something to cut something, and they didn't use the knives as often. These were 35, 25, 35 cents. So if it broke, or they just threw them away and got another one. They weren't terribly expensive. And this one right here, I haven't cleaned it up, but you know, it's a Granddaddy Barlow, but uh, the oversized bolster on the Barlow was to create more strength in the knife, and this is hollow. So the whole purpose of the Barlow is lost on this knife because it's all hollow throughout the knife, so it's not stronger. In fact, it's a lot weaker than a lot of knives. This one here, this Cutmaster, is solid. So that's a solid Barlow knife, and really strong, and you can feel it. It feels robust and rugged. Your camp knives, just really cheap, and they just sold tons of these things. So over 50% of all knives sold in America were sold by Imperial, who sold cheap knives. So another trend starts in the 50s. The Germans had rebuilt from damages of World War II. Also, the English, which had been devastated by war, and also, the same downturn in their industry. And so you start getting inexpensive German knives like this. This is plastic, and coming into the United States in nice Bowie knives. And the Germans did a super job at imitating stag from plastic, and very popular in the United States, who were still mainly producing leather knives. And so these German knives were just starting to come in the country in the 50s, and by the 60s, they were just a major force in the fixed blade industry. But in the 50s is when that all started. These German knives, this is an I brand right here, are superior quality. So these are really high quality knives, um, a lot better than most American knives. And you've seen them come in, and this Robert Class knife right here, Hen and Rooster. These are all brands that came in. Boker Soldier, very high quality knives coming into the United States, better quality than the Americans. Also, the English had recovered, and they always made a high quality knife anyhow, but they're starting to come into the United States again. And for a long time, the market was kind of lost for the English in America, but they start coming into the United States in a big way. This is a Wolstinghome, and just an absolutely high quality, gorgeous knife. This is a Wade and Butcher right here. Just phenomenal knives. That came into the United States from England and Germany. Again, that's hurting the United States market. It also set up the collector market. So, collectors in the 50s, you had a rapidly growing U.S. economy fueled by its industrial expansion. Wages were increasing, and that led to uh, people having enough income to actually collect knives. And so, really, the collecting fervor that took off in the 60s started in the 50s with higher wages and people becoming interested in these knives. And so that's really what characterized the 1950s. Um, Overall, American knives got better and were higher quality, but that really wouldn't last for long, and they really were struggling to compete with these high quality German and English knives that were coming into the United States. And in the 60s, they would again be faced with having to lower their quality to try to stay competitive. So that's the 1950s, a little synopsis of it overall. Um, Interesting thing about the 50s is the most profitable and largest English company was Richards, who made knives similar to Imperial. They made these shellback knives. So the same thing, the same demographics active in the United States was happening all over the world, all throughout Europe and any of the industrialized countries. People were leaving those rural areas, moving into the cities, and they had less of a need for knives, and that really was the rising storm for slip joints and kind of spelling the doom for it. Um, it's not all doom and gloom though. In the 50s, in the 50s, shoot, I don't have an example of it, but prop wood came out in 1953. Schrade Walden developed prop wood. That's a resin impregnated wood that's a lasting legacy. They're still using that type of material today, and it's popular. Also, Robeson developed the first true tungsten edged knife through some fantastic technology that they used. And also, they were the first to develop cryogenic tempering in the 1950s. And so that's the first time that was used, which greatly improves the quality of the edge of the knife and overall strength of the knife. So, it was new things were happening all the time, and they were incorporating them into the knives. So, I hope you found it informative. I hope you enjoyed the video. Um, Thanks so much for dropping by to check it out.